On Life and Meaning is brought to you by Blumenthal Performing Arts, celebrating its 25th year presenting the best in the performing arts, sharing and employing the arts as a major catalyst to strengthen education, building community cohesiveness, and advancing economic growth. Further support is provided by Foundation for the Carolinas, inspiring philanthropy and empowering individuals to create a better community. And by the Arts and Science Council, Charlotte-Mecklenburg's resource hub and lead advocate for the regional cultural community, providing culture for all.
I really look at the thin blue line as us being able to take care of our brothers and sisters and making sure that if you are in trouble, if you are in dire straits, that you have people that are going to have your back. Not to stop you, to not report you if you break the law or if you break the rules of conduct, but more so to help you when you're down, when you're going through something. We help officers going through cancer, and we help officers that have to file for bankruptcy, that lost loved ones tragically. I mean, it's just one of those things where we just circle around you and make sure that you have everything you need. The other part of that is that we are that line to make sure that everyone is safe and that we have a safe community and it won't be crossed. You know, when you look at the officers who are standing on the line at the protest, it's that line of, you know, if anybody gets behind them, there's chaos everywhere. But if they stand that line, the chaos will stay here. The peace will stay here.
Freda Lester is a retired Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department major. Over a 29-year career, Freda served in various capacities and districts. She served as a community liaison for several neighborhoods, creating programs that reduced crime and strengthened community advocacy. In her last post, she commanded the Northwest Service Patrol Area, one of the most challenging patrol areas in the city of Charlotte. Freda has received numerous awards and accolades for her police work, including CMPD Officer of the Year and the CMPD Medal of Valor for saving the life of a citizen. She serves on several nonprofit boards, including chairing the board of the Keith Family YMCA. In this episode, we explore community policing, the police response to citizen protests in Charlotte, drawing a gun, what makes for a good cop, and a life dedicated to public safety. I'm Mark Paris, and this is On Life and Meaning. Welcome, Freda.
Thank you, Mark.
Freda, you recently retired as a major in command of the Northwest Service Area for the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department after a 29-year career as a police officer. What did wearing the badge mean to you?
It was everything. I loved my career. I loved the steps that I took, even the ones that, while at the time I thought that I was going to go crazy, it got me to a point where I woke up every day excited about going to work every day. And I just think that being a police officer is not what people see on TV. It's a lot more than that. A lot goes into it. A lot of your heart goes into it. The pain that you see, the good things that you see, the good things in humanity that you see, with also coupled with the bad. But, you know, in the end, good always wins. You know, when you walk away from a situation like I have with the police department, even with the bad stuff, I have fond memories. I have really good memories of my time. I don't feel sour about it. I don't feel like I wasted my life. You know, I didn't have kids and I didn't get married, but I still feel like I had the fullest life I could possibly have.
Freda, you've seen policing evolve and the community's relationship with the police department change over the years. How would you assess the relationship between the community and the police department right now?
I feel like it's still evolving. I feel like, to be honest with you, I think the national media of things that happen with policing is always negative. When a police officer shoots somebody, when you hear how the reporters talk about it, it's always an edge of doubt and never open-mindedness to me. And so it always keeps people on edge. And then the other part of that is, I think sometimes when people look at police, they have their perceptions of what they've heard, what they've seen, or what they feel, and they don't look at police as humans. I really don't feel like they see them as a breathing human body with a heartbeat, with feelings, with a family, with lives. They see them as almost like a machine, that they're just automatically going to do this or do that. And when you surprise them or you do the opposite of what they expect, they don't look at you as like the norm. They look at you as the special, when actually most officers are the norm, that have good character, who do the right things and help people.
Why do you think that perception exists, that police are not human?
Well, I think that when we go back in history and go back into Jim Crow era, and you remember what the police were used to do in segregation and forcing the laws on the books that these different cities, states, counties had, they were the enforcer. So they didn't have a heart for anything. People viewed them as not caring about the human race because they would enforce something that they know in their hearts was probably wrong. I think especially with African American Black people, I feel that we have been through that. We have felt that, and it hasn't changed. So I went to Australia over the last summer, and I met this gentleman from Miami. And he was in his late 70s or so, and he and his wife were on a trip, and, we had gotten to talking because we were the only Black people on the bus. And so we talked, and, we were talking about our lives and what we've done. And I didn't really tell him I was a police officer, but he made a couple of comments, and I just went ahead and told him because I could feel that he probably didn't. And for the rest of the trip, he wouldn't speak to me. He wouldn't have any conversation. He wouldn't talk to me. And at the end, I asked him, I kind of like, did I do something to offend you? He said, I don't like cops. I said, well, I'm retired. I'm not a cop anymore. He said, but you were a cop. And I said, so what does that mean? I don't like cops. I never got an explanation, but no matter what I did and no matter who I was, no matter what kind of person I was and how much we connected before I told him what I did for a living, he put a wall up immediately.
You've been an officer for 30 years. You've heard, I don't like cops.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel when you hear that?
It's almost saying that you don't like doctors or you don't like a nurse. It's almost saying you don't like something for what they do for a living. It's not about the person. It's more about what they do for a living. And that hurts because that means that we have a bias towards a person because of the line of work they've chosen. Because that person may be the one that would make sure that you don't get unlawfully arrested. Or that person may make sure that you're stranded on the side of the road and there's somebody there to help you. So, it just hurts me that you're segregated and you're put into a group just because of what you do for a living.
Is it particularly hard to be a Black cop in the Black community?
I think it was easier for me because the communities I serve, I never got that feeling of, I don't like you because you're Black and you're a cop. But don't get it wrong, I was called Uncle Tom, and there were things that were said to me. Sister, if you were a real sister, you wouldn't be doing this, or, the things like that. So I've definitely had those things said to me, but it still wasn't bad. It was very few and far between.
Freda, what is the police department doing right?
I think the engagement that they have on so many different levels is amazing. Every time I read about something they've done since I've been gone, I'm just so excited because I know where the heart is. I know where they're trying to go, and I know that they love this community. And so they want to do things to show them that everyone is appreciated, even when we have to arrest somebody, even when we have to shoot someone in the line of duty. It's so many things. I think they have a community engagement department, and they're working with young Black men who've been incarcerated and who need to get a skill or who need to work to build their life back up, especially Black men between the age of, I think it's 17 and 23, something like that. And I know they've partnered with the Urban League and some of the other organizations to get that done. They have summer programs to help kids learn about what police officers do. They have communities that they go out and they intently go reach out to them and see that some of the things we can do, especially when it involves crime. How can we affect this? How can we bring people outside of their doors and talk about the issues and see how we can help? I mean, that's a big thing for people feeling safe. And I think that they do a really good job of reaching out and being a part of the community.
What could the police department do better?
I always will say communication, getting your story out of how good you are, because a lot of people don't know some of the things that they do. If I, as a normal citizen after I've left, I know some of the things because either I see it on TV or because, I know, and I talk to some of my friends that are still there. But I think communication would be my biggest thing that they would need to do.
They just need to tell their story better?
I think they do. I definitely think they do.
What else could they do?
I truly, internally, externally, I'm not going to lie to you, communication. It is hard for any organization of that size to be able to communicate effectively. And so I just feel like the things that they're doing is so good, but most people don't know about them. So if they're not communicating it or if it's not getting out the way that it should, nobody knows about it. So they think that there's nothing being done.
So what they can do better is public relations?
Some of it, yeah. Some of it. It's a lot of it. But inside is more internal. There were times when I didn't know that we were starting a new program until I saw it on TV. And just being able to communicate some of those things that maybe, you would have a lot more push for it, or we could get more generated for people around it if we knew that was going to happen or that was happening. So pretty much the only thing that I can think of that would really need to make them better.
Freda, if you were police chief, what would be your priority?
The community. What are some of the things that I could do to make the community feel safe, to make them open to communication with us, and what we do to help the people that needed to be helped? Going forward and looking at kids who've been incarcerated by the police and trying to help them get a leg up, that's a big thing. That's a really big thing. And then working with kids before they even get to that age to do something, to be a part of it. I know that their partnership with the Y, with Level Up, it's a big thing. Giving them something to do on Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights is amazing, because if you're left to your own devices, what are you going to be up to? And I know that program has made a difference. So things that we can do to help make our community safer, as well as help people have a good life. And then, of course, to make sure my officers are appreciated. I have this thing of, I really feel that they don't know how valuable they are. And it's my job to tell them every time I feel like they need to hear it, or they don't even want to hear it, or don't care about it, I'm going to tell them how valuable they are.
How much of policing has become social work?
A lot. But, and if you're not that kind of officer who wants to do all that, there's other avenues you can take, because we have community coordinators that help with that. But I think that we're the only ones that can have impact and get inside some of the situations, because people call 911. When there's a tragedy, when there's a problem, when there's something that they can't solve, who do they call? I think that we're like the first line of defense to help to solve anything, or help to bring peace and calm to something.
Freda, in 2016, protests broke out on the streets of Charlotte after a police shooting of a citizen named Keith Scott. You were in the police force at the time. What was your involvement as events unfolded?
Well, I went out to the scene because the officers that were involved in the shooting worked in one of my divisions. Our violent criminal apprehension team looked for a guy for robbery warrants. And so I received a call to go out to Ocon Court. I went out there to check on the officers, manage the scene, make sure everything was being done the way it was supposed to be done. the officers were taken off Old Concord Road to the police department to have interviews. And so I went down to the police station and watched some of the interviews, and then I went home. Once I got home, I was looking at Facebook, and I saw where there were officers having rocks thrown at them and a whole bunch of different things going on. And I got back up because I only lived like 5 minutes from there. And I went out there, and our civil emergency unit was already on scene. They were dealing with the crowd that was growing because they wanted answers, because previously that day, the daughter of Mr. Scott had posted a video saying that he had a book, or did a Facebook Live video that he had a book. And so people were very, very upset. And I don't know if you remember, but the day or 2 days before that was when another officer, female officer, had shot a gentleman who was just getting out of his car, and she was trying to order him to not reproach her, to stand still, to stay in the car. And she had shot and killed him. And then her husband was in the helicopter above and said, "That's one mean dude." So it was just a whole bunch of emotions going on at that time with the city.
That previous shooting wasn't here in Charlotte.
No, it was in another place, but it doesn't matter. Anytime anything happens in the country, it reverberates, because people were saying things that happened here, but it didn't happen here. It happened 5 or 6 states over. Said I got out of bed and went out there, and civil emergency was trying to keep the crowd back and working with that. So I decided to go where the relief was. And I was recording all the officers who had been hurt on the line, on the CEU line, and recording where they were going, what kind of injuries they had, and then getting water and getting refreshments for the officers who were taking a break and then going back out there.
What was your sense of the mood that night and how things were quickly escalating?
It was scary. It was scary because there was no managing. The crowd wouldn't calm down. It was scary. It was just one of those things where you just didn't know what was going to happen next. And when they got on to 85 and they stopped traffic and set a truck on fire and all the different things, you're sitting there like, what just happened? Is this really what's happening to our city? I've never known it to be something like this. I think I got to bed around 7 o'clock that morning and was up again at 10, back at it, because I had meetings and things that I had to do. And we had a game plan. We sat down and said, okay, if this happens tonight, or we have some protests tonight, what are we going to do? And so everybody had different responsibilities. So mine was, I had a team that we created that just responded on the outskirts of the protests. Like if we had somebody going like to a school or going to the outskirts of uptown, we kind of kept that in check. And then if they try to get on the interstate, we would block them from getting on the interstate until the CEU unit got there. So it was just different things like that we were preparing for, to do different things to try to contain the chaos, because it wasn't controlled. It was a lot of chaos. You know, one of the things that made me proud were our CEU units and their commanders. They were awesome in the midst of the different communications, things going on, people going different places, and the group wasn't contained, so they were having to spread out. The leaders were phenomenal in the way they approached it and how they tried to contain it and not showing emotion and not getting mad when people were throwing frozen bottles at them or spitting at them or, doing all the things that were happening to them. They could have really gotten mad and reacted, but they were just amazing. The officers and the leaders were amazing throughout that whole process.
Explain who the Civil Emergency Unit is.
So it's made up of officers in patrol mostly, and they are trained to deal with any type of civil emergency, as well as do searches for missing people. But they're trained in search and recovery. They're trained in civil disobedience. They're trained in everything. And they have the equipment, which you probably saw, with the helmets and the vest and the different things that they use to make sure that if something goes wrong, that they're there to be able to handle it.
And it's your view that the Civil Emergency Unit responded appropriately to the protests?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. with what they were faced. Because some of the things that were being done, the people were turning over cars, police cars, breaking out the windows, doing some of those things. They were just holding a line to try to calm them down and to keep them from hurting people and hurting the officers and trying to hurt other property. And sometimes it works really well and sometimes it doesn't.
The general perception is that on the first night, the police overreacted, and leading to an escalation in violence. And had the police been less concerned with property and more concerned with people, the protest would not have unfolded the way that it did.
And I disagree. The only reason why is because the officers were on scene investigating the murder when the crowd started, and they escalated to basically the officers were trying to get out, so they brought in a cat's bus, and the officers were just going to leave. And they wouldn't let them leave because they wanted answers. And most of the people there will tell you that they were upset, that they felt like what was on Facebook Live about him having a book and what the department was saying with the media was inconsistent, which means that we were trying to hide something. So that first night, I truly believe that would happen because we weren't trying to do all that. The only reason why the civil emergency unit was even brought out to me was because they stopped the bus and then one of our officers got knocked in the head and knocked off of the bus. You know, it was so many different things and the crowd was just getting rowdy. And so if we didn't respond, they wouldn't let us leave and if we didn't respond, what were we supposed to do?
What are your feelings when you see citizens protest against the police?
I feel like people have a right. You know, do we have bad cops in this country? Absolutely. One of my jobs, I feel like, was to weed out those bad cops because I really felt like we can't get anything done if we've got officers out here disrespecting and killing people for no reason. I don't feel like we have that type of problem here in Charlotte where we have people running amok with corruption. But I do feel like there are cops who don't have a lot of patience and they treat people a certain way. I just think that it's normal human behavior, but you have to realize who you are and the community you serve. And so if that's not something that you can do, I don't feel like you should be a cop. And I think, but more than not, those people are going to be identified by their peers more than they're not. They can't get away with it because their peers are not going to lose their job. Because basically, in a department, if you are in an administrative investigation and you lie, that's pretty much your job. Especially if, they find out that you lied. And most of the time when you're interviewing different officers, you're going to get a different perspective of what happened. And if you're found to be lying, you're going to be cited for termination.
When you see police on the line during protests and protesters are yelling at them, screaming at them, insulting them, cursing them, how do you feel?
I mean, I was called quite a few names during the protest, things that I hadn't been called in a while because of my job. I didn't see a lot of protests. So that week was eye-opening. But then I also had a conversation with some kids that were protesting that they felt like it was going a little bit too far. And so they broke off from the group and they were walking down the street one night. And so I stopped them. Hey guys, what's going on? Everything okay? And they said, tell us the truth. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, tell us the truth. Did that guy have a book? And I said, from all indications, we don't know everything yet, but no, he did not have a book. And I don't think the officers would have shot him if he was holding a book in his hand. And I gave them a little snippet of what it was that happened that night. And they were like, well, why won't they just say that? And I'm like, because it's still in the investigation. You can't really say all of this stuff now because it opens up a Pandora box. And so I just really want you guys to know that I'm not going to lie to you. I'm going to tell you the truth. And then the kid, he's like, what's your name? And I told him my name. He said, I'm going to remember this night because you were the first person that was really honest with me about why this is happening right now. And I'm like, people are upset. Me seeing people protest, you don't have to be nasty. You can protest and you can have a disagreement of opinion, and I'm not going to get offended by it because that's your right as a citizen in this country. But when it comes down to hurting people and hurting property and being disrespectful, I just think that's the hard part for any person to deal with. But like I said, with our CEU unit, they dealt with people throwing things at them, and they dealt with people being disrespectful, totally being disrespectful. And they still stood the line. And so I think when we talked about like how the tactics changed, I think it was more about the bike officers were there to go with the crowd so that they knew kind of where things were going, and then they can scout out the route of wherever they want. Because basically they just made circles uptown until 4 o'clock in the morning every night. They come out about 9, 10, and then they stay just making circles uptown. And so it's about closing streets down so they wouldn't run into traffic, and making sure that the protesters were safe so that nobody ran over them, that they could have their path and chant and whatever they needed to do to make their voices heard. I know other people may look at it different that were right there on the front line. They may look at it totally different from me. But from what I saw and what I had to deal with cutting off traffic and making sure that they were safe, I didn't mind them doing that. I just didn't want them to hurt people and property to get it done. I just didn't think it was worth all that.
Freda, county prosecutors decided not to charge Officer Vinson, who was the police officer who shot Keith Lamont Scott, concluding that the shooting was justified. When is a police shooting of a civilian justified?
To protect life. To protect my life, to protect your life, to protect a citizen's life from harm or danger.
And that night, Officer Vinson's action shooting Keith Lamont Scott was justified because he was protecting life?
Yes. He was protecting the life of the other officers, the life of his own, or anybody else who happened to be in that parking lot that day. I was looking at the stat on TV the other day of we've only had 3 shootings in the last year and a half where an officer took someone's life. And each one of those 3 shootings were somebody with a weapon, charging towards an officer with some type of weapon, or going after someone else. I don't know if you remember the lady, it was right before I retired, the lady who was pregnant and a guy home invaded her and was holding her hostage with a gun to her while he was backing up and had her, and the officer shot him. I mean, it's just those situations like that doesn't really get any hype. It's the ones that there's question. And one that comes to my mind is in Charleston, where the officers lied and said that he was trying to tase him when he wasn't. Those are the ones that make it like everyone. Like every shooting that we have is just like that. So the perception is that that's normal because that was caught on tape. And they probably would have gotten away with that had that citizen not been recording. And so, the situations like that is what make it bad for every single shooting we have, because people remember that.
Freda, have you ever had to draw your gun?
Drawing gun, yes. Shooting, no. I've definitely had to draw my gun several times. The one that to me is a big one that stands out for me is I was a rookie. I'd been on probably a year and a half or so, and we had stopped these guys who were in a car, tinted windows, and they were wanted for robbery, burglary. It was something that just happened, and we got behind them, and we did a felony stop, and it's a particular way you place your cars for a felony stop. The one person has to be behind, and then another person blaze off to the left, another person blaze off to the right. And so you kind of got the engine blocks helping you for cover if they come out shooting. And then you go over the loudspeaker and you call them out of the car, have them make certain actions, throw the keys out. And we had gotten the passenger out, and we were working on getting the driver out. And the driver kept moving around in the car, and we could see, because our lights were beaming on it, and we can see him moving around. And it was just, oh God, this guy is doing something stupid. He put the keys out, but he wouldn't get out of the car. And, so we were trying to put your hands up, put your hands up. Wouldn't do it. And finally he opened the door. I mean, just open the door like that. And it was like, okay. So what is he going to do? And when he balls out kind of like away from us. And so what's he got on him? Because his hand is, close up to his body. Put your hands up, and he won't do it. I got my gun out. I got it out, and I got my finger on the trigger. But he ends up just throwing, I think he had like a bottle or something, and he threw the bottle out. And we were just like, oh my God, thank you.
What is the adrenaline for you in a moment like that?
Oh, it's crazy. It's crazy. I mean, the heart rate goes up. You kind of get a little bit of tunnel vision where you're just kind of looking at that situation. You don't know what else is going on around you. And you have to take some really deep breaths to kind of bring yourself back and be aware of what's really going on. So it's almost like being in a hole, and you don't see anything else but what's in that hole.
Have you been in a situation where there have been shots fired?
Yeah. I was working as a community police officer, working a night shift, and we were on Pegram Street over off of Parkwood Avenue, and somebody just started shooting at us. We were walking down the street doing just a little patrol late nights because the neighbors were complaining about somebody shooting, and so we just all got out of our cars and just started walking down the street, and then people started shooting at us. And I mean, you could see the muzzle fire, but you didn't want to shoot where it was because it was towards a house. And you don't want to shoot back at it so we just all went for cover and just tried to get the K9 in and kind of track where the people were moving to. But yeah, we didn't shoot back that night because it was just too much. The background was just too much, and not knowing where that person was and if they were a moving target. It was kind of crazy.
Freda, have you lost any friends on the force to a police killing?
Yes. My first one was Terry Lyles. It was over off of Beatty-Sword Road. He was shot by a gentleman, Mr. Christmas, I think it was, that was in the back seat and had concealed a weapon. And he shot him from the back seat of the patrol car. Shot him in the head. That was in 1990. That was my first one where I was just paralyzed. I ended up having to block an intersection for the ambulance so they could get to the hospital. But it was just really scary. My second one was Jean Griffin. And that was, every time I think about it, it just sends chills down my spine. I felt like I was the only unit clear. It happened over off of Nations Ford Road. He was working off duty at a hotel. And he was shot by some kids. And I got a call from the dispatcher that said, "Are you clear?" And I said, "Yes." And they said, "We need you to call the sergeant." So I called the sergeant, and he said, "I need you to go pick up Officer Griffin's wife, who was also a police officer." And I'm like, "What?" "You got to go to her house, wake her up, and take her. Her brother-in-law is going to meet her, who was also a police officer. He's going to meet you there. You just got to take her to the hospital and get her there quick." So I go and I get to the house, and I'm standing in the foyer because the brother-in-law woke her up, and he was telling her, and he's like, "What's she doing here? What's she doing here?" And she's like, I need you to go. I need you to go to get dressed. I need you so we can go to the hospital." And I drove speeds that finally, when we got to Plaza, I think she said, "Freda, I need you to slow down. You are scaring the hell out of me. And I need you to call the hospital and see if he's still alive." And I was just scared because I just felt like if I didn't get her there in time, that I would be the worst person ever in life because she didn't see him in time. She did not get there in time before he passed away. But it was just one of those things where it was like, oh my God, I can't even imagine. Can't even imagine. So fast forward a little bit. We had John and Andy. We had Sean and Jeff. We had Scott Futrell. During that time, I wanted to pay homage to those families that have to deal with that. So I took over planning our police memorial. And I started doing that in 2001. It was the most rewarding thing for me to see those families come back every year to pay respect to their loved ones and to give them an opportunity to be around people who cared about them and who knew what they went through and cared and wanted to let them know that their sacrifice was not in vain. And it was just one of the most rewarding things of my career. When you go into a situation, you just never know what you're going to face.
Freda, what makes for a good cop?
I think one that cares about people. I think one that is smart and knows how to handle themselves. One that has a good personality. I just really think that if you have a good personality, you can pretty much talk your way out of anything. I've seen officers with people that were just going to beat their butts and, next thing they're hugging them. So I just really feel that if you have a good personality, you know how to take care of yourself, you take the training and use it correctly, that's a good cop.
How do you continue to feel good about people in a job where you see the worst offenders, the worst crime, murder, death, mayhem, rape? How do you keep your spirits up about people?
It's very conscious. It's a very conscious thing that you have to do, because I'm telling you, there were some days that I'm, oh my God, I don't want to deal with this today. I don't want to hear your voice today. I don't want to hear you talk junk to me. I just want you to do what I told you to do and keep it moving. I'm tired. I don't want to hear it. And you just have to be conscious of that feeling of everybody is bad, because it comes. And then by the grace of God, sometimes that one person or that one thing happens that restores your faith in humans, that restores your faith in people in general, because you just know you were put here for a reason. That kid that comes up to you and says, "Thank you, officer," or "Can I have a sticker?" Because they want to be a junior police officer. And that makes you feel good that nobody's tainted them. I'm going to tell you, one of the things that I hate the most about what people do is to tell their kids that I'm going to get you. Like, I'd be in uniform, I'd be in the grocery store, or I'd be somewhere, and a mother and father will walk up to me and tell their kid, "This officer is going to get you. You better watch out. You being a bad person, and they're going to get you." And I would turn right around and say, "Baby, I'm not going to get you. I'm going to love you. I'm going to be there to protect you. And anything that you need, you feel good coming to me about. I'm never going to get you. And the only way that I get you is if you're much older and you do really, really bad things." To let them know that don't instill fear in a kid, because when they're lost, when they have a situation where they need the police, they're not going to turn to us because they're going to be afraid that we're going to get them. Don't do that. So I just love the fact that there are days when I just feel so good about being a cop. There are more good days than bad days.
Did you ever want to quit?
Yes. Several times. More over the bureaucracy that goes on than anything happening or anything going on. Just the things that you have to deal with in being a police officer.
How did you feel when you arrested someone?
Sometimes sad, depending on their reaction. Sometimes happy. I arrested a gentleman who killed his girlfriend's baby. I've arrested people who rob people, who beat people, who rape people. And that was good feelings, because they violated someone in a way that that person probably won't ever get over. So arresting people wasn't the hard part. The ones that kind of got you were the ones that were sorry, and they were crying, and they really knew the mistake they made. They saw it and they got it. Those are the ones that you're kind of like, gosh, but you got to do it, because that's your duty, and they broke the law.
Did you ever not arrest somebody that you
Yes.
should have arrested?
Probably, yes. And I won't go any further.
Did you ever visit someone you arrested in jail?
No, but I have afterwards, after they got out, to check on them, to see how they're doing, depending on, I had a kid who had a drug charge. I had a kid who had an outburst at school. And we developed this relationship where I was checking on him and trying to help him, get past all the things he was going through. Unfortunately, he ended up getting killed, and I couldn't prevent that. And that's a hard part of it too, is when you work with someone or you try to help somebody go on the right path and things still don't go right. And it hurts you. It leaves a mark on you that you tried your best and nothing could change their path.
When you hear the thin blue line, what comes to mind?
I think there's two parts of that. The thin blue line is us taking care of each other, of someone who's in trouble. I really look at the thin blue line as us being able to take care of our brothers and sisters and making sure that if you are in trouble, if you are in dire straits, that you have people that are going to have your back. Not to stop you, to not report you if you break the law or if you break the rules of conduct, but more so to help you when you're down, when you're going through something. We help officers going through cancer, and we help officers that have to file for bankruptcy, that lost loved ones tragically. I mean, it's just one of those things where we just circle around you and make sure that you have everything you need. The other part of that is that we are that line to make sure that everyone is safe and that we have a safe community and it won't be crossed. When you look at the officers who are standing on the line at the protest, it's that line of, if anybody gets behind them, there's chaos everywhere. But if they stand that line, the chaos will stay here. The peace will stay here.
Freda, you grew up on a farm in Henderson, North Carolina.
I did.
What do you remember about life on the farm?
I lived with my grandparents, and I remember work. Work was pretty much all we did, I felt like. Even though that's probably not true, I remember work. My grandparents had tobacco and cucumbers and every vegetable you could imagine. They had a apple orchard, and I just remember everything we needed was on the farm except for cheese. Everything else she pretty much did. I remember her churning butter. We had our own chicken, so we had our own eggs. We killed our own pigs, so we had bacon and ham and chitterlings. But I just remember doing everything and work. When we had to do tobacco, we had to get up at 5 a.m. We would sell cucumbers, so we had to get up really early to fill our sacks with cucumbers, and she'd give us the money for whatever sacks we filled or how much it cost. So I really feel that's where I learned my work ethic and the kind of person that I developed into. It was because of my upbringing. And my mother had 7 brothers, and 3 of them lived right around. So I always felt like I had uncles and dads and, brothers, and my cousins were always around. So I never felt like I'm an only child. So I never felt like an only child because they were always around. So it was a really good life. Really, really good life.
Freda, at the age of 13, you moved to Raleigh.
Mm-hmm.
What were you interested in as a teenager?
So I was a worker, kind of like on the farm, but I had all these different jobs. I was very rebellious when I first moved because I really wanted to stay on the farm. But my mother married my dad, and they wanted me to live with them. And I think it was a good decision. I'm where I am because of the things that I was exposed to and the things that I did once I moved to Raleigh. I loved singing. I was in a show choir, and we did different competitions around the country. I was a marshal. I was in ROTC. I became the cadet commander my senior year in high school. So I was very involved in a lot of things, which kind of laid the ground for the things that I did when I became a police officer. Most officers weren't involved in things that I was involved in and the things that I took pleasure in doing. So it was natural for me to be involved in different activities and diverse things.
You went to the University of North Carolina at Charlotte
Mm-hmm.
and studied criminal justice.
Mm-hmm.
Why criminal justice?
I started out pre-law, and I started looking at the classes, and I took a couple of classes that were a lot of reading and a lot of studying. That was too damn much. It was just too much. I couldn't take it. And so on career day in my sophomore year, there was a Secret Service agent who came and talked to us about the Secret Service and how it was more than protecting the president. It was about currency and some of the other things that they do. And I was excited about it. And so he was like, look, you got to go to local department before you come to us because they require previous law enforcement experience. So I was like, okay, I'll do that. So a friend of mine, he was already a cop at CMPD, and he was like, you need to come here. You'll have fun. It'll be great. So I did. I applied in November of 1988. I graduated in December of 88. And then I got hired in February 22nd, 1989. And there my journey started.
How was the police academy?
It was hard. It was hard. And I wanted to quit most days. There were things that happened to me while I was there that it was just really hard to deal with. And I was the only Black female in my class. But I had a few guys that circled around me and was like, we're not going to let you quit. You're going to do this. You can make it happen. And they helped me. They really, really helped me. I'm friends with them to this day. It's been a really, really great ride.
What do you remember about being a rookie cop?
To be morbid, suicides. I felt like I had to respond to every suicide. I think about my first year, I had about 7 of them. Different people doing different things. And that was just hard for me. I almost quit again because I was like, if this is what my job is people being so desperate and have no hope, I don't know if I can deal with this. It just tugged at my heart. And my mom ended up having a stroke, and it just kind of changed for me. Dealing with people who had to go through stuff, I really hadn't had any of that. And so when my mom had the stroke, it kind of laid a different mind on me, and having to help her regain everything, regain her memory, regain her mobility, all of that. And it was just eye-opening for me. It kind of changed how I looked at situations that people deal with. And I became a little bit more empathetic because of that.
How did your career evolve within the department?
Ups and downs. I went through a hard part. One of my best friends committed suicide my 4th year in.
A police officer on the force.
Mm-hmm. He shot himself in the head in the police car on duty. And that changed a lot of things for me in the way that I treat people, and the way that if I ever was a supervisor, how I know how I would deal with officers who I knew were having a hard time. I knew he was having a hard time, but I didn't know to the extent that he would do something like that. So when I became a supervisor, I just kind of made it my mission to be there and present and to understand and have conversations. Being a sergeant was probably one of the best jobs I ever had. I started in Still Creek, far out down south, and I stayed there for a year, and then my passion called me to come to Metro now. And I stayed there for a couple of years, really developed how to do paperwork there. We had a lot of officers who were very aggressive, and they were locking people up, and we always had something going on because we had a lot of crime in that area. It has since changed. It's one of the best areas now in the city, I think. It's just really has changed and become a really good place to live and to work, as well as the community leaders over there are phenomenal. Then one of my friends asked me to help her in her division, which was Westover. And I went over there and became the community policing sergeant. And basically that's supervising all the officers who are out working with the communities. And one of the things I remember the most was Dorothy Waddy. She's since passed on, but she was such a spitfire. And developing a relationship with them, it was just amazing. And I had such a good time there. And when I got promoted, I was really sad because I didn't want to leave. I know I had put in for the whole process of being promoted, but when it happened, it was just like, gosh, I really love this.
Freda, in 2007, you were promoted to captain of the University City Division. What was that time like for you?
You know how, you have a dream come true? all throughout my career, I was like, oh, I would love to be the captain of the university. If I ever get promoted, I want to be the captain of the university. I want to be the captain of the university. And it happened. It was funny because at the time when they were promoting captains, they were putting them in the duty captain's office, which basically is around the clock position that's in control of the city. So you have to call in the cavalry if something happens. And so the chief called me. He was like, I really think you've been doing a good job as a sergeant, so I'm going to go ahead and put you in a division. I was so happy because I didn't want to go to the captain. But, if I had to, I would. But he put me in a division, and I was there for 6 years, and I just loved it. I absolutely loved it. And it was another one of those things of, gosh, I don't want to leave, but of course you want to get promoted. Of course you want to have a bigger reach. And that's when I got promoted to major in 2013 and went over the Special Investigations Unit, which was totally different for me because I had been in patrol my whole career. And to be over undercovers and dealing with the federal task forces, it was different. It was cool. It was educational. I learned so much about cases and how we identify what cases we're going to do and how we work them up. And I even went on some buys with the vice officers and did stuff like that. It was just a really good time for me. But I got called back to patrol and I loved it. I loved it. Having the captains and their divisions and allowing them to create and be able to serve citizens was very rewarding for me.
Freda, you've been off the force for a year.
Mm-hmm.
Do you still feel like a police officer?
No. My certification ended December 31st, so I have nothing. But no, I wanted to create a new life. I still love the CMPD. I love the people there. It's been amazing. I still see some of them. We have lunch or dinner. I still attend events, their promotions and stuff like that of the people who I've mentored. So I'm good. I'm good. You know how you leave something? You leave it all on the table. You've done everything you could. You've helped. You've nurtured. You've protected. You've done everything. And it was just my time to go.
Freda, what's next for you?
Living my life. Tackling my bucket list, my extensive bucket list. Being true to myself and doing the things that I want to do that make me happy. One of the things about being a police officer that stressed me out a lot was having a phone on all the time and being awakened in the middle of the night. Since you're a major over an area that has 4 divisions, it tends to be a lot of stuff going on. So you're over 1/3 of the city. And I was awakened. It was hard to sleep. And I just felt like I don't ever want to be on call again, ever in life. There's parts of it I miss. There's parts of doing things and being out there, but I don't miss being awakened in the middle of the night.
Thank you so much for your time, Freda.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Freda Lester is a retired Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department major. She earned a bachelor's degree in criminal justice from the University of North Carolina at Charlotte and a master's degree in business administration from Pfeiffer University. And now, a personal word. Freda Lester and I met in 2005. We were classmates in Leadership Charlotte, Class 26, the best class ever. Here is how Leadership Charlotte describes itself: as a leadership development organization that connects a diverse group of emerging and existing leaders with the city's key decision makers to gain a deeper understanding of how the city works. Over the course of a year, Freda and I met in a cohort of 50 classmates and immersed ourselves in what made the city successful and challenges facing the community. Every month, we would get together and explore a different topic: education, diversity and inclusion, city governance, business, arts and culture, equity and justice, and our own viewpoints and strengths as leaders. We built bonds around our shared experience of discovering ourselves and the city. One of the topic days I remember well was Law Enforcement Day. We learned about policing and the many ways the city secured order and safety. The police chief and criminal justice experts spoke to us. Freda and another classmate of ours, Mike Campagna, who was also a police officer, shared with us what they loved about their work and the many challenges police officers faced. We asked them questions about carrying a gun and wearing a badge. They told us how different the job was from anything on television or in the movies. We talked about many things that self-declared emerging leaders of the city would want to know about: underlying causes of crime, arbitrary profiling, police shootings, court sentencing, predictive analytics, automated reporting, ComStat meetings in which chiefs meet with division commanders and discuss police initiatives, the broken windows theory and quality of life indicators, community outreach, the latest weapons and crime prevention technology. It was all heady policy and procedure conversation. We were quite pleased with ourselves. Then our day changed. The entire class visited the Mecklenburg County Jail, all 50 of us. We received instructions on what to and not to do. We kept our hands to our side. We dressed modestly. We avoided eye contact. It was a somber visit. We walked through the intake process where new detainees are searched and their personal items taken away. We saw inmates in jumpsuits in a common area. We walked quietly in a single file through a hallway with men imprisoned in solitary holding cells. The men stood in their cells as we walked by. We could see their faces through a small window staring back at us. Some men had vacant looks. Other men looked at us with anger and contempt. One man banged suddenly on his door, breaking the silence and startling us. We didn't stay long. The visit to the jail abruptly reminded us that behind the statistics were human beings who live far different lives than those of us who walked by in our privilege. The men behind bars were not having conversations about what made the city successful and the challenges facing the community. The men behind bars were not listening to panel discussions and asking questions to experts about predictive analytics. The men behind bars were not planning their next civic engagement activity and social get-together. Law enforcement is complex. We want our streets safe. We want law and order. But we want justice and mercy, too. It takes a remarkable person to walk the line, to carry a gun and wear a badge, to watch out for us, to run toward danger, to give up their lives for us. Over the years, I've seen Freda out and about in her uniform. She is warm, she is kind, she walks the line. This is Mark Paris, and you've been listening to On Life and Meaning. Additional support for this podcast is provided by the UNC College of Arts and Architecture, celebrating a decade of creative education in the arts and design. Thank you to our funding partners and to my teammates, Andy Go, producer of the show, and to Chris Curriton, art and media director. This is how you can help. Please write a review on iTunes. It helps us grow our audience. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter. We'd love to hear what you think about the show. And become a patron. We are on Patreon, a crowdsourcing platform that allows you to support what you value at a level you choose. Visit us also on our website on lifeandmeaning.com. Thank you for listening.